Chapter 7. The lady on the counter was immune to bribes. Immune to charm, too, so in the end I handed over my ID and credit card and took a room I didn't need for a night I didn't want to spend in a motel by the bus station. As she handed me the pen to make my mark on the next available line, I let it drop from my hand. The ballpoint bounced off the top of the small black and white TV she had muted before landing on the thin carpet floor and rolling under one of two mismatched cabinets behind her. She threw scorn at me as she turned away and bent over to retrieve the one working pen the owner had allocated to her shift. When her back was turned, I quickly flicked back to the previous page and did my best to commit to memory the names of those who checked in either side of Nina's arrival. Joe Cussman, Rick Barbacello, Jane McNamara, Cam Rice, Sadie Brown, Suss. She was back with the pen and had pulled the book out from under me. With a lick of the finger, she turned the page back to where I needed to sign and slammed the hardback ledger down on the counter with such force that the tearaway calendar bounced clear of the surface. "There anything else I can help you with, mister?" I knew enough to know she wanted the next words out of my mouth to be no. So I gave her that, took my key when she offered it, and made my way down to room 13. I opened the door. You could smell the stale air under the pine-fresh spray the room was blasted with each day. With the door closed, I drew the curtains to make it harder for her to keep a beady eye on me. To the rear of the room stood the standard cubicle bathroom. On the wall nearest to its door was a large window which had been painted shut. I turned the TV on and the volume up in order to mask the sound of any damage that could be caused as I pried the window open. I grabbed hold of the ringed handles and pulled up. The wood cracked and moaned as I slowly amped up the pressure, before finally the window came clear of the frame and rolled upwards with a metallic snarl come squeak from its ungreased hinges. I popped my head out. It was an uncovered service alley at the rear of the building with enough space for an industrial dumpster, which rested against the exterior wall of the bus station. I climbed out and went to the dumpster. It hadn't been emptied yet. Trash that guests bagged up didn't get bagged again, so I knew I was looking for all the lime green bags with the pull cord ties. There were 20 of them, and with each one I fished out, and returned to my room came the fear that my friend from the front desk would suddenly appear. Back in the generic safety that comes from a $12 a night boarding, I tore into the trash bags one at a time and picked through the discarded moments we all leave behind. I was 11 bags in when I caught sight of myself in the mirror, a frenzied giant in a room full of trash looking for what exactly? I chose to do this. I chose to do this over mourning my best friend because this felt slightly less helpless. I sat on the edge of one of the two single beds these rooms carried and lit a cigarette. A piece of paper sat among two banana peels and a cola bottle. The moisture from the rest of the trash had smudged some of the handwriting, but for the most part, it was legible. The Burley Room 9 was scribbled along the top of a gas station receipt, dated the morning Nina arrived in town. They had been here. Maybe in this exact room. Definitely in this motel. Whoever Nina had arranged to meet up with had taken down her information and then discarded it before blowing town. But had they done something to her before then? I had the sensation of losing track of myself as my mind raced. I took another look at myself in the mirror to make sure I was there, or at least mostly there. I was making progress. Nina's death had raised a question, and each action I took was bringing me closer to the answer I needed. I folded it up carefully and put the receipt in my wallet before sifting through the trash one last time, prior to tossing the bags out my window. The Burlington PD offices sat taller than any of the buildings around it, with scaffolding climbing up the left-hand side, as a mix of legal and illegal day workers went about throwing up an extension. At the front desk, the sergeant was holding court, as four other officers listened to his recount of a particularly hilarious traffic stop involving an albino hooker and two dwarves. I hung back. Cops didn't like to feel like they were being disrespected. It made them unpredictable. In my time dealing with them, disrespect included answering them in anything but a subservient tone, correcting them on inappropriate or misuse around the implementation of law, and interrupting them when they were bragging or entertaining fellow officers. So the little Irish-looking dwarf hits his friend and says you're so full of shit, your dick isn't 12 inches, and then the hooker says it isn't, but it sure does smell like a foot. It cracked up the two cops that got it. One stood mute. Eventually, his patrol partner explained the mechanics of it, and he came to the agreement that it was hilarious before eventually dispersing to provide me with safe passage to the front counter. After a minute or two, the desk cop stopped acting like he didn't see me. I stole a look at his badge. Sergeant Koufax. I pulled out my credentials and slid them across yet another desk. He took a look and flicked them back before he offered. A little outside of your jurisdiction, aren't we? 2 parts personal to 1 part business. You know how it is. If you say so. So how can I help you? You guys got a call to the Burley the other night. Lady wrestler died in one of their rooms. Oh, yeah, Sergeant Koufax replied, eyeing me up and down. You one of them. I was, yeah. Blew my neck out. That's why I'm here. I'm just trying to get some answers for my friend's family. Koufax took his glasses off and leant forward, then in a tone as slow and deliberate as it was contemptible said, Answers? The girl's family are getting their answers, Mr. Gecko. They're with the medical examiner as we speak. So why don't you go back to California and deal with cheating spouses and runaway teens? Leave the policing to the police. Hostility from the PD was not something new to me. Give a mediocre white man a gun and a badge and tell him he's the thin blue line between law and chaos, and he'll protect that privilege to police over any duty he's sworn to undertake. The idea that most retired cops became PIs was laughable. Most cops hate Ps simply because we're more motivated to do a better job than they were and in turn make them look bad. Most retired cops golfed poorly. The level of hostility I could feel beaming off Sergeant Koufax was something else as he went about aggressively filing. He was taking my mere existence personally. Yeah, maybe I'll leave the policing to the police, I said as I backed up towards the door. You're doing a great job keeping all those pens and paper clips in line. Thank you for your service. I hightailed it to my car, but when I got in, I didn't start up the engine right away. I sat with my eyes fixed on Koufax and his desk. He seemed to call one of the officers over who he had been talking to earlier. Then another. Each came to the door, looked out into the parking lot, then returned to Koufax. There were enough cars in the lot that I guess they couldn't tell whether I was still here or not, so I waited them out. Eventually, they went back about their business, which was when I went about mine, and drove back across town to the morgue. I pulled up next to the only other vehicle with rental plates and steeled myself for the prospect of seeing Nina's family. They would look different to the last time we'd met. They'd been contorted and made raw with grief, the kind of emotion I was stuffing down so deeply into the back of my mind that it was all but resting on the pin in my neck. I entered the A.C. Kist lobby and was presented with Nina's father, Marvin, and her baby sister, Cassie. I'd met Marvin 2, maybe 3 times when we were on the road together. Nina always spoke of her old man the way I did of my favorite wrestlers as a kid. In his youth, he had volunteered for Korea in order to have some choice over his deployment. When it came around, he re-enlisted for Vietnam, as he didn't think it was fair that kids with no idea what to do went and fought, while men like him sat at home and critiqued from the sidelines. If the stroke he'd recovered from 10 years previous had stripped him of his physicality, then Nina's death had taken just about everything else. He had a third of the frame I'd remembered him having. His hair was a dirty white, and his skin tone had the look of week-old hamburger meat. I opened my arms and brought him into my chest, his tears immediately soaking through my shirt and pinning my chest hair to my flesh. He went to weep again, but he caught himself at the last moment, and then I felt what was left of his frame tighten up as he eased away from me. While his face had 10,000 more lines and sorrowful breaks in it, his voice was no different. "How in the hell could something like this happen, Jack?" he asked. I told him I didn't know, that I was still trying to figure that much out, but I would figure it out. He could count on that. Cassie could barely make eye contact with me. She knew I'd been out of the game for a while and that my time with Nina had been sporadic at best since my injury, but I could see she was angry with me. She blamed me. She blamed wrestling. She blamed Frank and Jimmy and just about everyone else who ever graced the ring. I couldn't begrudge her any of her feelings. After a few minutes of reminiscing, she spoke. "I need to get my father back to the hotel. Tomorrow morning, we're taking my sister home so my mom can say goodbye. They're telling me she overdosed. That's what happened. But I want to know why, and nobody around here can tell me why." "I know how you're feeling, Cassie." "No, you fucking don't," she spat at me before regathering what composure she had left in her. "It's not your sister lying in there all cut open, so no, you don't. You're some kind of detective these days, yeah?" I nodded. "Then find out why, because I need to know why my sister's dead." I took Cassie by the arm and guided her away from her father. He took to one of those uncomfortable lobby seats rather than attempt to hold himself up. "I'm struggling to believe Nina overdosed. I'm going to look into this until I'm satisfied I know what happened." "Can I call on you when you're home?" I asked. Cassie steadied herself and replied, "You find out what happened to Nina, you can move in for all I care. I need to go now. I need to get him back to the hotel so he can call Mom." I watched Cassie leave with her father. He was writhing with sorrow again, and I found myself stomping down on anything that felt like emotion. There would be a time for it. The morgue was quiet, damn near unattended. I pushed through the swing doors at the far end of the lobby and found a corridor which led into a cold, white hall. I was halfway down it when a morgue attendee bumped into me on the way out of one of their operating rooms. She had a pair of eyeglasses under her protective eyewear that was causing both to fog up. She removed one, then the other. "You can't be back here," she said. "I'm here to get a copy of the autopsy report on Nina Simmons for the insurance. Koufax at the PD said I should be able to collect it today." She sighed. "He shouldn't have told you that. It's not ready yet." We shared a look and agreed that Koufax was the worst before she guided me out of the Hall of the Dead and into a side office. It had a plant and photo frames and other reminders that life remained outside of these walls. She introduced herself as Sarah Bellows and offered me first her hand and then a paper cone of water from a cooler. I took both and replied with a lie. "Jack Fargo." Sarah went to her desk and grabbed a copy of the preliminary report from her in-tray and dropped it in my lap. I flicked the manila cover over and took a sip. "It's not finished yet, but I can let you read it now, then fax you a copy of the final report when it's done," Sarah said. I did my best to speed read it in case Koufax and his pals combined their brain cells and took a drive over here to make sure I was leaving the police work for the police. There were no historic injuries on record, nothing that would require self-medication, nothing that would have led to an overdose. There was perimortem bruising at the back of her skull, which was likely caused by a fall. "Who stands up while doing drugs?" I said, more thinking aloud than anything. "I'm sorry?" I pointed to the line about 2 recent abrasions on the back of the skull, which Sarah explained were likely caused when she collapsed as her heart stopped. I agreed, then elaborated. "Yes, but if she overdosed and fell and hit her head, who stands up while doing drugs? Who has the motor function to take the amount of drugs needed to overdose while standing up?" She thought about this for a moment, then offered. She wasn't necessarily standing up. She could have realized she'd taken too much and was trying to get up to get help then. She gestured a flopping collapse motion, as though to put the final full stop at the end of Nina's life. "You see anything like a serious injury? Something that would have caused her enough pain for her to be self-medicating?" I asked. "There wasn't any scarring, but if she didn't seek treatment, then maybe." "What about these bruises on her wrists and chest?" She exhaled and thought through what I was asking. "CPR is likely responsible for the bruising to her chest and the wrists. She was a wrestler. Maybe rope burn." Rope burn was a good call. I asked the question I knew I didn't want to and that her family probably wouldn't have thought of. "Any sign of sexual assault?" "First on the scene didn't mention anything about her being in a state of disrobe, so..." "First on the scene, right? What was his name again?" "Suarez. Officer Celine Suarez," Sarah corrected. "Celine, right. I thought it was the other guy. Long day." I handed the file back to her. "When the toxicology comes back, can you send me that through, too?" She looked at me like I'd asked her a riddle. "There wasn't a toxicology ordered." "Why not?" "Investigating officer said it wasn't necessary because of how the scene looked. It was obvious." "Obvious. I don't see anything in here about stomach contents," I stated. "Still working on that, but there wouldn't be any pills. They'd have dissolved by then." On the drive back to the Burley, I noticed I'd got myself a second shadow. A PD prowl car sat 2 vehicles behind me all the way there. I parked up outside of my room and adjusted my rear view in order to put eyes on them as they got themselves comfortable across the street. I got out of the car, went into my room, and gave it 5 minutes. When I came back out, they were still there. I lit a cigarette, smoked it to the filter, then put it to death under my heel before making my way over to the front office. Damien's face was redder than a baboon's slapped ass. I'd forgotten to feed him. "Where's my food, dude?" he snapped, no longer acknowledging our size difference. I took a 20 from my wallet and put it on the counter for him. He gave it, and then me, an indignant look. "Hey, that's more than I would have spent on you. Get yourself a bucket of chicken and a 6er on the way home." I barked. Luann appeared in the office doorway behind him. She looked a little unsure about meeting my gaze. "This is the guy I was telling you about? I guess he's cool?" Damien conceded as he pocketed the Jackson and left with a ding of the overhead bell. Luann had mousy brown hair, definitely not the owner of the length of growth I'd plucked from the chair in room 9. I leant on the counter and pumped my bicep on the chance she was a fan of the brawn. Her eyes gave away a lack of enthusiasm that I'd only ever seen in the hospitality industry. I introduced myself. Luann rolled her eyes towards the front door and guided me outside. She lit a cigarette before offering me one. I took it and sparked up. "Damien tells me you were working the night that lady passed away." "That lady? Mister, I know who you are, and I know who she is, who she was. Don't play me for a fool. Go ahead and ask your questions, Luann said between exhales of smoke. I liked her. She was a straight shooter. Fair enough. The night she died, Nina was wrestling at the Carson. Did you see what time she got back to her room? I was doing something in the back office, so I didn't see her, but I heard her all right. She wasn't alone. She bring a guy back? I asked. I don't know if it was a guy. Whoever it was she liked? She was laughing her ass off all the way to the front door. I had the people from room 8 complaining at 2 a.m. about the noise, but they don't pay me enough to go knocking on a wrestler's door to tell them to go to fuck to sleep. You see anyone leave? Do these cameras work? They do, yeah, but the police took the tapes already. Damien told me Nina spent 2 nights here. She have any visitors the first night? Now that I do know. Pretty thing, maybe in her 40s. She looked Indian. Her tone made it almost sound like a question. You mean like Mumbai Indian? I asked. No, the other American Indian, Cherokee or whatever. That's Indian, right? You make guests sign a register or anything? Luann shook her head and said something about it not being the Hilton, which I didn't think was an unreasonable statement. I was looking over the autopsy, and there was no tox screen ran on her because the scene made it so obvious that it was an overdose. Well, that's a crock of shit if I heard one, Luann snapped. Oh, yeah? I said in that way that invites more information. Heck yeah. I saw that girl as they worked on her. Sure, there were a few bottles of liquor, but I have cleaned rooms where 2-bit rock bands have had coked-up orgies. I have seen a few overdoses in my time, and I'm not saying she didn't OD. I'm saying it didn't look like an OD. Luann caught sight of the police car, and I watched as she immediately clammed up. She put her cigarette out and went back inside. I knew not to push it. She was a stand-up lady. I was halfway to my room when she chased me down with a rolled-up trade in her hand. She unfolded it out and offered me a thick black pen. I signed it, and as I did, it became clear she was insulating herself from the lookout in the Panda car. It was a smart move. She was wasted on a motel night shift. I stayed in my room the rest of the evening, working over my notepad, as I tried to make sense out of what I knew. It didn't. Very little made any sense. Shit. Wrestling is my art form, Martella. It's time to paint my canvas out. If she hadn't read it in one of the rags, she'd see it on Friday. I called her at home, and after a few long tones, she answered. She was stunned into silence when I told her. But she didn't cry. She was a nurse. She was familiar with life and death. She was able to hurt and appreciate the loss without going to pieces. Or maybe it was just for my benefit. I felt grounded on the call with her. I couldn't wait to see her again, to just be Jack, the man around her, not the wrestler or the Seamus. If you're going to be out of town for a few more days, then I'll drop by your office, pick up your voicemails, and return any calls or reschedule any meetings you've blown off, said Markella. You don't have to do that. I know I don't. I want to. It feels like I'm helping somehow. That would be great. I think we're going to have to pay for a second autopsy when the Simmons get her body back, I said, thinking aloud again. You think they'll go for that? I think Cassie will. She'll have to convince her parents. When are you back? She asked. I'm in Pawnee Rock on Friday, so I guess late or early on Saturday, depending on flights. Silence ate up a few seconds before she said, I have a date for Friday night, Jack. I didn't respond. How do you respond to that? As luck would have it, I didn't need to because she added, I think I'm going to cancel. It doesn't feel right with everything and all. I'm going to make that pregnancy class with you. I haven't forgotten, I said. It was her turn to go silent, and she did for a moment. I should let you go. I know how your neck gets stiff if you are on the phone for too long. She knew too much of me, which was precisely why we were no longer together. She knew which parts of me I could change, which parts I couldn't, and which ones I wouldn't even try. I wished her good night and then hung up and wished I was there with her. She was right, though. My neck was beginning to throb. I left my room and filled the ice bucket. When I returned, there was a uniform on my doorstep. He'd removed his name badge and his number pin from his collar. As I got closer, he pulled his flashlight from his belt, hit the high beam, and jammed it right in my face. I instinctively went to raise a hand to block the light, but when he told me to lower my hand to my side, I got the sense there was a silent ultimatum attached to the statement. I closed my eyes to prevent them from burning right out of their sockets and could only hear him step closer. When he was in my personal space and I could all but taste the tacos from his breath, he spoke. Some of the boys reckon you'll resist when I arrest you. They reckon I'd need backup to bring you in, but maybe that's what I want you to do. Resist. What's the charge I'm being arrested on, officer? He lowered the torch. My vision was patchy. There were huge circles all but burned into my eyeballs. I blinked them out and could make out enough to know he was weighing me up. You're interfering with a crime scene, pal. Crime scene? Where? You getting smart with me? Asked the officer. I rented a motel room that had been released back to the proprietor by the Burlington Police Department after a thorough investigation. I'm not interfering with anything. He slapped the ice bucket out of my hand. Beautiful little white cubes hit the sidewalk and either shattered or skated off into the night, leaving behind a damp trail. He seemed pleased with himself, like he had looked me over, interrogated my psyche, and concluded that the perfect button to push was the one any high school bully would reach for on day one of a new term. He smiled and waited for my reaction. In that moment, I decided if he wanted to act like a heel, I'd give him my best promo stare down, and I set my fight face on him. I stared unblinkingly into his eyes and waited for his move, while he waited for me to blink. When the blink didn't come, he got a little less certain about his next move. After a minute of me dead-eyeing him, he smiled and retreated to the safety of his prowl car. I went into my room and closed the door. All the ice the Burley had to offer wasn't going to relax the angry knot he'd put in my spine.